Sasuke Uchiha's blood dripped down Code's white claws, while the gates of Konoha burned in black flames. Seeing the ninja world's most feared hero falling to his knees with his chest pierced should have been the end of everything, but this exact moment of imminent death was the trigger for the greatest and most terrifying resurrection shinobi history has ever dared to witness. To understand how the Hidden Leaf Village reached this scenario of absolute destruction, you need to rewind just a few hours. When the skies suddenly went dark, the wind stopped completely, and a crushing pressure made the air weigh tons on the shoulders of every villager who couldn't even catch their breath. Code had invaded the center of Konoha's power with an uncontrollable bloodlust, displaying a power that mocked all physical laws, forcing Sasuke to take the front lines alone to buy the precious time needed to evacuate the children. Even knowing perfectly well that his current body was nowhere near ready to withstand the brute impact of a monster of that caliber. The Uchiha dodged and attacked furiously with his sword coated in cutting lightning, but every strike landed against the claw marks scattered by the enemy resulted in a brutal fracture to his own bones, demanding that he burn his life energy down to the very last drop just to avoid being dismembered in the first few seconds of that chaotic clash. It was in the middle of this visual carnage, tasting metallic blood in his mouth and his vision failing from the concussions, that Sasuke realized the harsh reality that the strength of a single man would never be enough to stop the living anomaly in front of him, pushing his desperate mind to make the darkest and most dangerous decision of his entire shinobi journey. He had to sacrifice his own body's stability in an almost suicidal close-range trap, letting the enemy intentionally pierce his defenses just to buy the tiny, precious fraction of a second needed to channel a forbidden seal he kept hidden, loaded with a portion of the corrupted chakra he had confiscated from Orochimaru's own secret lab. With his lungs burning from the hallucinating pain of the wound in his chest and his mind focused on his family's faces, Sasuke slammed his bloody hand onto the completely destroyed ground, tearing the fabric of reality, ignoring all divine laws of life and death to summon the Edo Tensei straight from the darkness of the underworld and bring terror back to the battlefield. The earth beneath Code's feet cracked with a deafening roar as the freezing, suffocating aura of two ancient coffins emerged from the thick dust, revealing the cruel eyes and imposing postures of Itachi and Madara Uchiha, who didn't return from the dead with the intention of fighting, but with the sole purpose of directly handing over all the supreme powers of their existences to the last living heir of their cursed clan. The paralyzing shock of coming face to face with these supreme legends instantly wiped the sadistic smile off Code's face, but that monstrous being couldn't even begin to imagine the hell he was about to face once this ancient millennium chakra finished fusing into the Uchiha's veins to form the deadliest weapon of all generations. The transfer of the ancestral chakra wasn't a gentle or calm process, because the second Itachi and Madara touched the shoulders of the last living Uchiha, a torrent of pure crushing energy invaded Sasuke's nervous system, tearing his cells apart from the inside out in an excruciating ritual of pain that demanded an absurd willpower just to keep his consciousness intact. That immeasurable power, carrying centuries of hatred, tactical genius, and survival instinct, began to violently fuse with Sasuke's Rinnegan, forcing his pupil to pulse intensely as it gained new tomo, changing the color of the very air around him, and generating a gravitational shockwave that made the rocks float before turning to dust under the colossal pressure. Instead of summoning that gigantic spiritual avatar that all ninjas knew as the pinnacle of defense, Madara's insane genius whispered directly into Sasuke's mind to perfectly condense that entire mountain of chakra over his own skin, creating the dreaded armor of the god of destruction that compressed the purple fire into a dense and lethal energy suit. Code didn't wait for the transformation to finish and leaped with blind fury, shooting at hypersonic speed through his claw marks scattered across the battlefield, aiming a fatal strike straight at the Leaf Hero's neck, believing that this exhausted human could never react to a multi-directional attack of that complexity and brutal speed. But before the white claws could touch a single hair on the Uchiha, a devastating sonic boom echoed through the ruined village, revealing that Sasuke had already blocked Code's attack using only the back of his hand coated in the condensed armor, breaking the enemy's fingers with a dry impact that sent him flying dozens of meters backward with overwhelming force. The stone ground melted just from the physical presence of Sasuke walking slowly toward the monster, proving that carrying Madara's supreme chakra and Itachi's flawless ocular perception had turned him into a true, untouchable deity of war, where his every little movement tore the oxygen apart and created pressure vacuums capable of crushing solid steel. Realizing that brute force wouldn't be nearly enough to bypass that absolute glowing defense, Code tried to use a desperate sequence of dimensional jumps through his claws, appearing from completely unpredictable angles to try and find a tiny blind spot in the vision of that terrifying new compressed Susanoo, now protecting the ninja's body. The thing is, Itachi's spiritual wisdom now flowing through Sasuke's veins allowed him to read not just the enemy's physical movements, but the very killing intent before it was even executed, turning the fight into a brutal humiliation, where the hero simply stretched his arm into empty space, and the villain literally materialized his own face straight into the crushing fist. With his body broken and his pride destroyed by that one-sided massacre, the invader was lifted off the ground by his throat, while Sasuke's spiritual armor burned his pale skin, preparing the hero to deliver the final execution strike with a blade of black lightning, so dense it distorted the light itself around it, promising to erase that cursed threat from existence forever. You probably think the victory was already in the bag, and that the unimaginable sacrifice of bringing those legends back from the beyond had paid off. But while Sasuke's lethal blade pierced the enemy's chest in a supposedly fatal blow, a grotesque and sick smile began to form on Code's bloody face, revealing that the monster had lowered his guard entirely on purpose. Instead of agonizing over the unbearable pain of his inevitable death, Code's trembling hands firmly grabbed Sasuke's arms and activated the terrifying karma marks that began to glow in a corrupted, horrifying shade, acting like a starving parasite that quickly infiltrated the invisible connection of the Edo Tensei to initiate the absolute theft of all the ancestral power, keeping those two souls alive. Code's cold, bloody touch acted like a lethal anchor driven straight into Sasuke's exhausted soul, allowing the corrupted and starving karma marks to expand like black roots across the Uchiha's numb arms, establishing a profane, parasitic bridge that ripped the Edo Tensei's spiritual connection apart in a millisecond of pure, paralyzing terror. That monstrous host wasn't just draining a superficial amount of energy to heal his wounds, he was acting like a relentless black hole that started sucking the very existential essence of Madara and Itachi out of Sasuke's boiling veins, forcing the indestructible armor of the god of destruction to violently crack into translucent pieces that faded into the heavy air. The brutal shock of having that ancient chakra ripped so violently from his cells caused an instant convulsion in the shattered body of Konoha's last hero, making him cough up a torrent of dark blood while feeling every fiber of his being scream in unspeakable agony. Realizing that the enemy's tactical genius lay exactly in using the Uchiha's greatest weapon against himself. As the macabre suction intensified in a deafening vortex of distorted light and cutting winds, Code's pale body began to undergo a terrifying mutation right before the battlefield's disbelieving eyes, with his spatial marks gaining a sickly red hue, while symmetrical patterns identical to the Sharingan's Tomo appeared carved directly into the flesh of his demonic face. The despair of that impossible situation reached truly catastrophic proportions when the cracked earth receptacles anchoring Itachi and Madara to the living world began crumbling into thick ashes in the background of the devastated scenery, clearly indicating that the immortal souls weren't returning peacefully to rest in the afterlife, but were being cruelly dragged straight into the villain's spiritual stomach. Madara's untamable, absolute fury echoed like an invisible thunderclap across the entire dimension as he realized with disgust that the supreme pride of his bloodline was being chewed up by a disgusting alien anomaly, trying in vain to force his paralyzed spirit to fight back against that colossal magnetic current, unraveling his centuries-old consciousness into fragments of red light, instantly consumed by the darkness. In that exact painful, critical moment of drainage, Itachi's serene yet anguished voice echoed in the depths of his younger brother's torn mind, desperately begging Sasuke to cut off his own arm with a lightning blade, and sever the cursed jutsu's connection immediately, warning that this insatiable parasite would devour not only the ancestral chakra of the dead, but the very life force still beating inside the Uchiha's heart. Despite Itachi's grim warning echoing repeatedly in his head, and the torturous, unimaginable pain of his own life rapidly draining through his sweaty pores, Sasuke vehemently refused to step back a single inch from that clash, knowing with absolute crystal clarity that if he let Code go and allowed the monster to fully and stably assimilate that supreme power, there wouldn't be a single living soul left in his beloved village to tell the tale. Sensing his visibly exhausted prey's stubborn and useless resistance, the sadistic villain let out a deafening laugh that vibrated terrifyingly through Konoha's shattered ground, raising his newly corrupted arm to materialize a repulsive, grotesque, and deformed version of the Susanoo's energy armor, fusing the legendary sacred purple fire of the Uchiha with the absolute darkness of his karma in a display of brute strength capable of making the whole world tremble in fear. Our hero's last resilient pillar of defense finally collapsed completely when the merciless suction reached its destructive, overwhelming climax, painfully extinguishing his Rinnegan's divine glow as Sasuke's fragile, strictly mortal body plummeted to his knees against the blood-stained ground, falling completely void of chakra and humiliatingly bound by the damp claws of the enemy who now wielded the undeniable peak of his cursed heritage. Code imposingly raised a sharp black blade of pure corrupted power to rip Sasuke's head off in a single motion and end the historic reign of the shinobi once and for all. But in the exact millisecond the lethal weapon came slicing through the air to touch the Uchiha's vulnerable neck, a completely impossible golden flame never before recorded in history exploded from the depths of his blind eye to incinerate the invisible web of death itself. The blazing explosion of that golden flame erupted from the depths of Sasuke's blind eye in a surreal fraction of a second, violently clashing against Code's black blade and instantly melting the corrupted power before it could touch the hero's skin, creating a barrier of celestial light so blinding it illuminated the dark ruins of the entire Leaf Village as if a new sun had just been born on the battlefield. The monster stumbled back, screaming in absolute agony as he desperately tried to use the karma marks to absorb that new flaming element, realizing with genuine primal terror that this impossible fire wasn't made of ordinary chakra that could be swallowed and stolen, but rather of the purest, crystallized life force that the Uchiha was sacrificing from his own soul to rewrite the laws of reality once and for all. Without blinking a single second at the searing pain tearing across his bloody face, Sasuke revealed that by fusing the Amaterasu's ancient hatred with the unbreakable will of fire inherited from his deepest bonds, he had given birth to a divine blaze strictly focused on absolute purification, turning his mortal despair into the ultimate weapon against the host who dared desecrate his beloved clan's rich history. The golden fire mercilessly climbed up the invader's deformed arm in a visual spectacle of overwhelming purge, incinerating every dark particle of that sadistic karma from the outside in, while the spiritual prison trapping the legends shattered into a million sparkling fragments, finally allowing Madara's colossal essence and Itachi's unparalleled wisdom to be expelled from the villain's body into the knight's freedom. Quickly realizing he would be reduced to mere ashes forgotten by the cutting wind, Code tried to rip off his own infected limb in an act of pathetic, pure desperation and tear a dimensional rift in the fabric of space to cowardly run away, but the divine flames had already spread across all his claw marks scattered through the village, completely sealing any miserable escape route he could try to use to save his own life. The majestic, translucent silhouettes of the two Uchiha ghosts brilliantly formed behind our hero's trembling, exhausted back, displaying smiles of serene approval and a silent pride that needed no spoken words to be perfectly understood, lending what remained of their now purified auras to provide the necessary support to Sasuke's mortal body and stop him from falling before completing his grand destiny. Feeling the invisible spiritual support of his older brother and the most feared ghost of his entire noble bloodline, the silent protector of Konoha's shadows raised his right hand one final, definitive time, molding the remaining golden flames into a deafening storm of sharp white lightning that shrieked like thousands of furious birds, crying out for the cursed enemy's absolute fall. The meteoric impact of that supreme strike crossed the short distance in a silent, incredibly devastating flash that pierced Code's chest with the immense ease of a hot knife cutting through the cold wind, unleashing a formidable whirlwind of sanctified energy that swept the monstrous being's body from the bottom up, disintegrating his pale flesh until there was literally nothing left but a thin floating smoke. The comforting silence finally embraced the entire exhausting war zone as the last bright golden spark faded into the gentle midnight breeze, allowing Itachi and Madara's immortal souls to peacefully dissipate into the afterlife with the absolute certainty carved in their chests that the Uchiha name had been successfully redeemed by a warrior willing to sacrifice every last drop of blood for the greater good of the shinobi world. If this epic and truly electrifying story made your ninja heart beat way faster with pure hype right up to this final second, go ahead and drop a massive like and subscribe right here with us, so you don't miss absolutely any of the crazy battles coming up, always remembering to check out the other insane video already running on the channel, with more exclusive stories waiting for you, and I'll catch you guys here until our next journey.